Family, let me tell you something. Most of us pray hoping that Jesus will hear us. But in this story, there's a man whose faith was so bold, so confident, that it actually shocked Jesus. Imagine that. The Son of God, the one who created the universe, the one who knows all things, being amazed at a human being's faith. That tells me something. It's possible to live with a faith so uncommon, so unwavering, that heaven takes notice. Faith that recognizes who Jesus really is goes beyond mere belief in his ability to perform miracles. It isn't about having an intellectual agreement that he exists or that he is powerful. It is about seeing him for who he truly is, the Son of God with absolute authority over every situation, every sickness, every storm, and every spiritual power. This is the kind of recognition that changes how you approach life. It's one thing to believe Jesus can do something. It's another to live with the unshakable conviction that he reigns as Lord over all, and therefore your situation cannot have the final word. The Roman centurion in the Gospels gives us this exact picture. He wasn't part of the Jewish covenant. He didn't grow up with the scriptures, temple worship, or prophetic traditions. Yet, when he encountered Jesus, he immediately understood what so many of those who had been around him missed. Others saw a man who healed, who spoke with wisdom, who gathered crowds. But the centurion saw authority. He saw the one who commanded not just men, but sickness and nature itself. That insight didn't come from religion or tradition. It came from recognizing the reality of Jesus' identity. When you know who Jesus really is, it changes your posture toward him. Many approach him as though he is just another option among many, or as a helper who might be able to lend a hand. But when you understand he is the ultimate authority, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, you stop negotiating with fear. You stop letting circumstances dictate your mood. You begin to approach prayer not as a desperate last resort, but as a confident declaration of trust in the one who has never been defeated. The centurion understood something essential about authority. As a soldier, he lived under a chain of command. If a higher ranking officer gave him an order, he didn't question it. He knew that order would be carried out because authority backed it. In the same way, he recognized that Jesus didn't have to be physically present to perform a miracle. All Jesus had to do was speak the word, and the situation would change. That's what true recognition of his identity looks like. Believing his word is as good as done before you ever see the evidence. Too often, believers pray with uncertainty, as if God might need to be convinced to act. But if you truly know who he is, you pray with a calm assurance. You pray knowing that nothing outranks him. Cancer doesn't outrank him. Financial lack doesn't outrank him. Broken relationships don't outrank him. Demonic attacks don't outrank him. When you see him for who he is, your prayers stop being a timid request for help and start being in alignment with his already established authority. Recognizing Jesus for who he truly is also shifts how you handle delays. If you only see him as a miracle worker, you might grow frustrated when the miracle doesn't come immediately. But if you see him as the sovereign Lord, you understand that even the waiting period is under his authority. You begin to trust his timing because you trust his nature. The centurion didn't question how long it would take. He didn't demand proof. His recognition of Jesus' authority meant he could rest in the certainty that the word spoken was already in motion. Here's a short example to bring this. Imagine a general in the military ordering a mission. The soldiers under him don't run back. Every 5 minutes asking, "Are you sure you meant it? Are you sure this will work?" No, they act with confidence because the order came from the top. Now picture two people facing a storm at sea. One sees Jesus as just a fellow passenger who might help bail water. The other sees him as the one who commands the wind and waves. Which one sleeps in peace during the storm? The one who knows who's really in charge. That's the difference recognition makes. In life, storms will come, health challenges, family struggles, unexpected losses. If your faith is only in what Jesus can do, you'll be shaken every time something doesn't happen the way you expected. But if your faith is in who Jesus is, nothing can take away your peace. Because when you know who he is, you know he's still in control, even when you can't see how the outcome will unfold. The centurion's faith shocked Jesus because it was rooted in this deep recognition. It wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy, but it was unshakable. And that's the kind of faith we're called to. Faith that rests not in miracles themselves, but in the one who commands them into being. When you truly see him for who he is, you won't just believe he can. You'll know he already has the final word. Faith that doesn't require physical proof is one of the purest and most powerful forms of trust a believer can have. It means you take God at his word without needing to see, touch, or have tangible evidence before you believe. It's the kind of faith that says, if God has spoken, it is settled. This kind of faith is rare because human nature often craves visible confirmation. We feel safer when we can point to something and say, there, it's working, I can see it. But God calls us to a higher level, one that believes even when nothing in the natural suggests it's possible. The Roman centurion in the Gospels models this perfectly. His servant was sick and on the verge of death. Most people in his position would have begged Jesus to come to their home, to lay hands on the sick man, or to perform some physical act they could witness. That would have been understandable. It's easier to trust when you can watch the healer at work. But the centurion took a different path. He told Jesus, you don't even need to come. Just say the word, and my servant will be healed. That's extraordinary because it placed full confidence in the power of Jesus' word alone. No visible sign, no physical touch, no personal appearance, just the spoken promise of the Lord. This faith didn't depend on emotional reassurance or sensory validation. It didn't require a timeline or progress report. It was rooted in the understanding that when Jesus speaks, reality changes instantly, even if the change isn't yet visible to human eyes. And that's the key. True faith believes the unseen is already done because the one who promised it is faithful. Many of us struggle with this because our senses dominate our thinking. We believe God will provide, but we still panic when the bank account is low. We believe He heals, but we're discouraged when the medical report doesn't improve right away. We believe He can restore relationships, but we give up when the other person's attitude doesn't shift quickly. The centurion's example challenges us to detach our faith from what we can physically verify and anchor it instead in the authority of God's word. When you live this way, you give God room to work beyond the limits of your human understanding. If you need proof before you believe, you are putting conditions on God's power. But when you believe without proof, you step into the realm of the miraculous because you're operating on heaven's terms instead of earth's. That's why Hebrews 11:1 says, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. It's not just believing after you see. It's believing so firmly before you see that it becomes as real to you as if it were already in your hands. Let me give you a short example. Imagine a man who receives a signed letter from the king guaranteeing that a large sum of money will be delivered to him in a month. He doesn't see the money yet, but because he trusts the king's authority and integrity, he starts making plans, paying debts, and telling people his finances are about to change. Someone might call him foolish for acting before he has the money in hand, but he's not being foolish. He's acting on the authority of the one who promised. That's what the centurion did with Jesus. He treated the Lord's word as final and acted as though the healing had already occurred. This type of faith pleases God because it honors His integrity. It says, Lord, I trust you enough to rest in your promise, even when everything around me says otherwise. It's not about ignoring reality. It's about trusting the one who defines reality. The centurion didn't deny that his servant was sick. He simply acknowledged that Jesus' authority was greater than the sickness. If we could learn to live this way, our prayers would shift. We would stop asking God to prove Himself and start thanking Him for what He has already spoken. Our attitudes would change in the waiting season because we wouldn't measure God's faithfulness by how things look in the moment. We would have peace while others panic, confidence while others complain, and endurance while others give up. Faith that doesn't require physical proof frees you from the constant emotional roller coaster of circumstances. It places your hope in the unshakable, not in the temporary. It's the faith that says, Lord, I don't need you to show me. You've already told me, and that's enough. And when you live with that kind of trust, you will see God move in ways that leave no doubt in anyone's mind that it was his hand at work. Faith that understands authority is a level of belief that changes the way you see prayer, problems, and the power of God. It's not just about believing that God can do something. It's about knowing that when he gives a command, nothing in heaven, on earth, or under the earth can resist it. The Roman centurion in the Gospels capture this perfectly when he told Jesus, "I'm a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I say to one, go, and he goes. To another, come, and he comes." This wasn't small talk. It was his way of saying, I understand how authority works, and I recognize that you carry the highest authority there is. As a military officer, the centurion lived in a structured system where orders flowed from the top down. If his superior gave him an instruction, he didn't hesitate, question, or argue. He carried it out. Likewise, when he gave an order to his soldiers, they obeyed without debate, because his authority wasn't just his own. It came from the entire power of the Roman Empire backing him. The centurion applied this understanding to Jesus. He realized that the same way soldiers obeyed him because of Rome's authority, sickness, disease, and even spiritual forces must obey Jesus because all the authority of heaven backed his word. This is where many believers miss out. Too often, we approach God as if he's far away, as if we must convince him to act, as if he's weighing whether or not to intervene. But faith that understands authority doesn't beg. It declares. It aligns itself with heaven's chain of command. When God says something in his word, it's already settled. His promises aren't suggestions, they're decrees. His commands aren't hopeful wishes, they're final rulings. This kind of faith knows that the authority of God isn't up for negotiation, and it prays from that position of confidence. Understanding authority also changes how you respond to delays or opposition. If you truly grasp that God's word carries ultimate authority, you won't panic when circumstances seem slow to change. You won't assume that resistance means defeat. You'll recognize that sometimes the order has already gone out in the spiritual realm, and the visible results are simply on their way. You'll hold your position in faith because you know the chain of command cannot be broken. Too many prayers today sound more like desperate pleading than confident declarations. Pleading assumes you're trying to persuade. Someone who's unsure, declaring assumes the one in authority has already spoken, and you are standing on that word. The centurion didn't say, "Lord, please come and try to heal my servant." He said, "Just say the word, and my servant will be healed." He didn't need Jesus to physically be there because he understood that authority operates through command, not proximity. Here's a short example to make this clear. Imagine a police officer directing traffic in the middle of a busy intersection. He lifts his hand and cars stop. Not because he's physically strong enough to hold back, thousands of pounds of moving steel. But because everyone recognizes the authority behind his gesture, that authority doesn't come from his personal size or strength. It comes from the entire legal and governmental system standing behind him. Now picture that same officer, instead of confidently raising his hand, nervously waving at cars, hoping they'll stop. That's how many Christians pray, timidly hoping their words might work, rather than standing in the full authority given to them by Christ. When you understand that Jesus has all authority in heaven and on earth, as he declared in Matthew 20:18, and that he has given his followers the right to operate in his name, your faith shifts gears. You stop approaching problems like powerless victims and start confronting them like authorized representatives of the King. You begin to speak to sickness, lack, fear, and oppression, not with wishful thinking, but with the confidence that they must obey the one who sent you. The centurion's insight amazed Jesus because it showed that this man, though outside the Jewish faith, understood something many of God's own people didn't. Authority in the spiritual realm works just like authority in the natural realm, except on a much higher level. If you recognize that heaven's throne backs every word Jesus speaks, you will never see his promises as mere possibilities. You will see them as guaranteed outcomes, waiting only for their appointed moment to manifest. Faith that understands authority isn't arrogant. It's rooted in humility and trust. It acknowledges that the power doesn't come from you. It flows through you because you're under the command of the one who rules over all. Once you grasp this, your prayer life becomes bolder, your hope becomes stronger, and your endurance becomes unshakable. You stop praying like you're knocking on a closed door and start praying like you're delivering orders from the throne room of heaven. That's the kind of faith that shocks Jesus. The faith that knows the power of his authority and lives like it. When you grasp that, you stop asking if and start standing on because. You stop wondering when and start thanking him now. And when you do, you'll find that his word still carries the same authority today as it did for the centurion 2,000 years ago. Faith that humility builds is a faith that stands strong, not because of self-confidence, but because it leans completely on God's strength and goodness. Many people mistake faith for boldness that is rooted in personal power. But true biblical faith is the opposite. It is bold because it is emptied of self and anchored entirely in the Lord. When you know that everything depends on him and not on you, your faith becomes purer, deeper, and harder to shake. The Roman centurion in the Gospels embodied this perfectly. Here was a man of rank and influence. He commanded soldiers. He had the respect of his peers. He could order things to be done and see them happen immediately. And yet, when it came to Jesus, he took a completely different posture. Instead of using his status to demand attention or treatment, he said, "Lord, I am not worthy for you to come under my roof. Those words are not weakness. They are strength clothed in humility. This was a man who understood that Jesus was infinitely greater than himself, and that anything he received from him would be pure grace. Humility is not self-hatred. It is the accurate recognition of where your strength truly comes from. It acknowledges that without God, you have no ability to make things happen spiritually. But with God, you have access to unlimited power. It keeps the glory where it belongs, on the Lord. Pride subtly says, I can handle this. I just need a little help. Humility says, Lord, without you, I can do nothing. And I need you completely. Faith thrives in this kind of soil because it leaves no room for self-reliance. One of the dangers in the life of a believer is that success can breed subtle pride. When God answers prayers or blesses us with resources, we may begin to think we've earned His favor or that our own wisdom brought about the results. But humility guards against this by continually reminding us that we are recipients, not originators. Every answered prayer, every blessing, every breakthrough is a gift from a gracious God, not a wage we've earned. The centurion understood that, which is why his faith was so remarkable. Humility also keeps your faith from being shaken when you face obstacles. If you think your faith depends on how good you are or how much you've done, then any failure or shortcoming will cause you to question whether God will still act for you. But when your faith is built on humility, you know it was never about your worthiness in the first place. It was always about His mercy. That's why you can keep believing even after you've made mistakes. Because your trust is in God's character, not in your track record. Here's a short example to illustrate this. Imagine two people who need help lifting a massive boulder. One of them thinks he's strong enough to do it with just a little assistance. So he tells his friend, help me, but I'll carry most of the weight. The other admits right away, I can't move this at all without you. Please take the lead. The first man may struggle, strain, and even injure himself because his pride won't let him surrender control. The second man, because of his humility, allows his friend to take the full weight, and the boulder is moved with ease. In the same way, humility and faith hands the full weight of the situation over to God instead of trying to split the load. The centurion's humility didn't weaken his request. It strengthened it. Because he knew he wasn't worthy, he didn't demand Jesus' presence. He trusted Jesus' authority to work from a distance. That kind of humility actually magnified his faith because it stripped away any sense of entitlement and left only reliance on Jesus. It showed that his confidence was not in his position, reputation, or power, but in the ability of the one he was speaking to. God delights in this kind of faith because it puts him in his rightful place as the source and sustainer of all things. The Bible says in James 4:6, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Grace is the fuel of faith. And humility is what opens the door for it to flow freely. When you humble yourself before the Lord, you position yourself to receive things you could never earn and to experience answers that go beyond your capacity to produce. So the faith that humility builds is not flashy, not self-promoting, and not dependent on personal achievements. It is steady, unshakable, and full of peace because it rests entirely on God's character and power. This was the centurion's secret, and it is the key for every believer who wants a faith that not only pleases God, but amazes him. Faith that amazes Jesus is a rare and extraordinary thing. In the Gospels, we only see 2 moments where it is said that Jesus marveled or was amazed. One was at the great unbelief of the people in his hometown, and the other was at the great belief of the Roman centurion. Think about that for a moment. The Son of God, who knows all things and sees all things, stopped in his tracks, astonished at the quality of a man's faith. That tells us there is a kind of trust in God that is so pure, so unshakable, that it captures heaven's attention. The centurion's faith amazed Jesus because it was rooted in an unshakable understanding of who he was and what he could do. It was uncluttered by doubt or religious performance. It wasn't about earning favor or trying to impress. It was about recognizing the authority and sufficiency of Christ. The centurion believed that Jesus said something, it would be done, no matter the distance, no matter the circumstance. That was enough for him. Most people in that time, even those who followed Jesus, seemed to need visible proof or physical presence before they could trust him for the miraculous. But the centurion bypassed all of that. He believed without needing to see, without requiring Jesus to come to his home, without demanding a sign. His faith was not based on what his eyes could verify. It was based entirely on who Jesus is. That's the kind of faith that not only moves mountains, it moves the heart of God. Faith that amazes Jesus is also free from the pride that often undermines belief. The centurion was a man of status, a commander of soldiers, yet he humbled himself in the presence of Jesus. He didn't leverage his position to demand a miracle. Instead, he expressed deep humility, saying he wasn't worthy to have Jesus come under his roof. That humility made his faith even more remarkable. It's one thing to believe God can do something. It's another to believe it so completely that you take yourself out of the center of the story and put all the focus on him. Another reason this faith amazed Jesus, because it aligned perfectly with how God operates. God's kingdom is built on the power of his word. In creation, he spoke, and the world came into being. In every miracle, his command carries the force to bring about change instantly. The centurion recognized that reality instinctively. He knew that Jesus didn't have to be physically present to accomplish something. All it would take was his word, and it would be done. That kind of agreement with heaven's order is rare. And when God sees it, it brings him joy. Here's a short example to help picture this. Imagine a skilled architect who has designed hundreds of buildings. Most clients need to see a completed model or blueprint before they believe the project will turn out well. But one client hears the architect's vision and says, "I trust you. I don't need to see the plans. Your word is enough." The architect is moved, not because the client flattered him, but because the client's confidence shows a deep respect for his ability and integrity. In the same way, when you trust God's word without needing to see every detail or receive constant proof, it shows him that you take him at his character. That's what amazes him. When Jesus marveled at the centurion's faith, he turned to the crowd and essentially said, "I haven't seen faith like this, not even among my own people." That's both a compliment to the centurion and a challenge to everyone else. It invites us to ask ourselves, is my faith ordinary, or is it the kind that could make Jesus stop and marvel? Ordinary faith believes after it sees. Extraordinary faith believes before it sees. Ordinary faith is shaken by obstacles. Extraordinary faith stands firm in the face of them. The beauty of this kind of faith is that it's not reserved for a select few. The centurion wasn't a prophet, a priest, or one of the disciples. He was an outsider to the faith community. Yet he tapped into a trust in God that surpassed many who were on the inside. That means any one of us can develop this kind of faith if we choose to know Jesus deeply, trust him fully, and obey him completely. Faith that amazes Jesus doesn't happen by accident. It's the result of knowing his authority, living with humility, and refusing to let doubt take root. It's about being so convinced of his character that his word alone is enough to settle every matter in your heart. When you live with that kind of trust, you don't just experience answered prayers. You experience the joy of knowing that your faith brings delight to the one who gave you life. And that is a reward greater than any miracle itself. So here's the challenge. What would your life look like if you trusted Jesus like that centurion did? What prayers would you pray? What risks would you take? What mountains would you speak to? Don't settle for average faith when God has invited you to extraordinary faith. Live in such a way that Jesus looks at your life and says, "Now that that's faith,